Hey everyone, how are you all doing today? Tonight we step into a world that has long fascinated outsiders, one wrapped in both luxury and secrecy, the Ottoman harem. To many, the very word harem conjures images of silken cushions, jeweled lamps, and women lounging in exotic splendor. But the truth, as always, is far more complex. The harem was not merely a place of leisure. It was a stage of ambition, discipline, intrigue, and survival. Hidden behind high palace walls, the women who lived there were not passive ornaments, but active players in a system that combined politics, beauty, and power. They came from faraway lands, captured in wars, gifted by foreign rulers, or purchased in markets, each carrying her own story of loss, hope, and reinvention. Once inside, she entered a world where every smile, every gesture, and every whispered word could determine her fate. Daily life in the harem was a paradox of restriction and opportunity. On one hand, the women lived confined, bound by rules, hierarchy, and the constant presence of guards and eunuchs. On the other, the harem offered them chances they could never have dreamed of in their homelands: education, luxury, and, for the most ambitious, the possibility of wielding real influence over the empire's most powerful man, the Sultan himself. But make no mistake, survival here demanded far more than beauty. A concubine needed wit as sharp as her smile, patience that could outlast her rivals, and charm that could sway hearts in rooms where politics and pleasure mingled in dangerous harmony. For some, the harem became a prison of silken chains. For others, it was the gateway to unimaginable power. This was not just a world of jeweled gowns and golden trays. It was a place where lives were remade, where ambition burned quietly behind lowered eyes, and where the path from obscurity to influence could be carved one evening at a time. Entering the harem was only the beginning. Once inside, a woman's fate depended on her ability to adapt, endure, and rise through a world structured by strict hierarchy. The harem was not a place where beauty alone guaranteed success. It was a crucible, shaping girls into polished instruments of charm, culture, and subtle power. Most concubines began their journey as asimi, or novices. These young women arrived often disoriented, strangers to the language, customs, and rigid etiquette of the palace. Their days quickly filled with lessons designed to erase their old identities and replace them with the refined grace expected of an Ottoman court lady. They learned to walk with elegance across marble floors, to bow at precise angles, to serve with both humility and dignity. Education was at the heart of their training. Many were taught to read and write in Ottoman Turkish, sometimes even Arabic and Persian. They memorized poetry, practiced calligraphy, and studied music. The sound of lutes, flutes, and zithers echoed through the women's quarters, blending with laughter, whispered gossip, and the rustle of silks. Dance was equally important, not the wild freedom of village celebrations, but carefully choreographed movements that conveyed beauty, poise, and restraint. Yet training was not only about refinement, it was also about obedience. Senior women, often former favorites of the Sultan who now acted as mentors, watched the novices closely. Discipline was enforced through constant correction, and mistakes could mean humiliation or punishment. Those who resisted the rules found themselves pushed aside, their chances at advancement slipping away. Still, the system offered rewards. If a concubine displayed talent, wit, or unusual charm, she could rise quickly. Some became iqbals, favorites of the Sultan, earning private chambers, fine clothes, and influence. A select few advanced further, becoming cadens, official consorts, or even the powerful Haseki Sultan, the favored woman whose voice could carry into the empire's politics. For many, however, the climb was not about love, but survival. To rise meant protection, wealth, and freedom from obscurity. To fall meant remaining a shadow, one among hundreds, forgotten in the gilded maze of the harem. The path of a concubine was therefore both treacherous and alluring, a staircase paved with silks and secrets, where each step demanded calculation, patience, and relentless determination. Life inside the harem was a rhythm unlike any other in the empire, a blend of luxury and confinement, routine and intrigue. From the outside, people imagined endless pleasure and idleness, but behind the gilded gates, the days of the concubines were carefully structured. filled with duties, lessons, and the constant game of survival. Mornings began early. Servants moved through the chambers, lighting braziers and carrying trays of food, flatbreads, fruits, honey, and spiced coffee. The concubines rose from their low couches, their embroidered quilts pushed aside, and prepared themselves for the day. Some went directly to lessons, practicing music, dance, or calligraphy. Others assisted senior women with dressing and grooming, learning by imitation how to carry themselves with elegance. The harem was not only a school but also a stage. Every gesture, every word, even the way a woman laughed was part of her performance. Concubines practiced conversation, learning when to flatter, when to remain silent, and how to charm without overstepping. In this world, wit could be as valuable as beauty. But daily life was not all duty. There were moments of leisure too. Women embroidered silks with intricate patterns, played games of chess or backgammon, or lounged on cushions sharing stories from their homelands. The sound of gossip carried through the corridors like perfume, sweet but sometimes dangerous. Friendships bloomed, but rivalries were just as quick to spark. Jealousy was unavoidable in a place where every woman dreamed of rising higher. Entertainment came in many forms. Musicians performed in the courtyards, dancers moved gracefully across tiled floors, and storytellers recited tales of heroes, lovers, and distant lands. On festival days, the harem could burst with celebration, filled with song, laughter, and feasts that rivaled those of the outer palace. Yet even in joy, the women remained aware that their lives were confined within walls they could rarely cross. For all its comforts, perfumed baths, silk garments, and exotic foods, the harem was also a cage. Windows were latticed, doors guarded by eunuchs, and freedom beyond the palace was almost unimaginable. Many women spent years, even lifetimes, without ever stepping outside its walls. Daily life in the harem was therefore a paradox, a world of refinement and privilege, but also of confinement and uncertainty. Every day carried the same question for each concubine. Would she rise, would she fall, or would she be forgotten in the endless flow of silken days? Though outsiders often imagined the harem as a place of idleness and indulgence, within its marble halls pulsed the quiet heartbeat of imperial politics. The women of the harem were not simply companions of the sultan. They were potential power brokers, capable of shaping the destiny of the empire from behind latticed windows and veiled conversations. At the center of this hidden web stood the Valid Sultan, the sultan's mother. Her influence was unmatched. She advised her son in private, controlled the hierarchy of the harem, and often determined which concubines gained favor. To cross her was to risk exile to obscurity, but to win her support was to step into the inner circle of power. Many viziers, governors, and even military leaders found their careers swayed by her unseen hand. The sultan's favorites, too, wielded subtle authority. A single concubine who captured his heart could see her family's fortunes rise overnight. Brothers, uncles, and cousins of a favored woman might suddenly receive lucrative posts or titles. And if she bore the sultan a son, her influence could stretch even further, for the mother of a potential heir carried both honor and danger. This gave rise to fierce rivalries. Behind the silks and smiles, the harem was a battlefield of alliances. Women schemed, spread rumors, and sometimes even plotted against one another in hopes of rising higher. Every gesture was calculated, every word weighed, for even the smallest slip could be twisted into a weapon by a rival. Yet politics in the harem was not only about women. The eunuchs who guarded the gates were themselves powerful intermediaries, carrying messages between the harem and the outside world. They could make or break reputations, choosing which whispers reached the sultan's ears and which disappeared in silence. The politics of the harem did not always remain confined within its walls. Decisions made in those private chambers rippled outward into the empire. Wars were encouraged or discouraged, marriages arranged, ambassadors received, all depending on the influence of voices heard only in the sultan's private quarters. For this reason, the harem was both feared and respected. To some, it was a den of manipulation where women ruled through whispers and charms. To others, it was the hidden heart of the empire, where strategy and diplomacy unfolded in ways the outside world would never fully see. In truth, it was both. The harem was a place where love and ambition intertwined, where devotion and rivalry clashed, and where the destiny of an empire could hinge on a glance, a word, or the favor of a single woman. For centuries, the Ottoman harem has been a subject of fascination, curiosity, and scandal in the eyes of outsiders. Travelers, chroniclers, and later European artists often painted it as a place of endless pleasure, an exotic dream where women lounged in luxury, awaiting the whims of a sultan who commanded absolute indulgence. But the truth was far more complex, and the myths surrounding the harem reveal as much about outsiders' imaginations as they do about the reality within its walls. When Western visitors glimpsed the harem, usually only through rumor or rare, highly controlled encounters, they exaggerated what little they saw. Painters in Europe depicted vast halls filled with reclining women in translucent silks, fountains pouring over marble floors, and music echoing through perfumed chambers. These fantasies told the West more about its own desires than about Ottoman life. The harem became in their eyes a symbol of sensuality and decadence, the embodiment of what they believed set the East apart. But inside, the truth was far different. The harem was a place of discipline, routine, and hierarchy, more school and court than paradise of leisure. The women did not spend their days idly reclining on cushions, but rather training, serving, and maneuvering within a strict system. The Sultan himself rarely indulged in the way European fantasy suggested. His choice of favorites was deeply entwined with politics, alliances, and dynastic strategy. These misconceptions, however, carried power. They shaped the way the Ottoman Empire was perceived abroad, fueling Orientalist fantasies that persisted for centuries. Even today, the very word harem often conjures images born more from Western art and literature than from Ottoman reality. Yet, in truth, the mystique was also part of the harem's own design. The veil of secrecy surrounding its inner life ensured that myths thrived. Outsiders could only guess, and their guesses became legends. This aura of mystery both protected the harem and amplified its allure. The reality and the fantasy then coexisted, one a world of discipline, ambition, and hidden power, the other a dreamscape of silks and desire imagined by those who were never allowed inside. Between the two lay the enduring fascination of the harem, half truth, half myth, and entirely unforgettable. Though the harem itself faded with the decline of the Ottoman Empire, its legacy endures, woven into history, culture, and even imagination. What once existed as a private, hidden world has become a symbol, interpreted and reinterpreted across centuries. Politically, the harem left a profound mark on the empire. During the era often called the Sultanate of Women, powerful figures like Harem Sultan, Kosem Sultan, and Turhan Sultan shaped the course of Ottoman rule. Their influence extended far beyond palace walls, guiding state policies, forging alliances, and sometimes even determining the line of succession. These women proved that the harem was not merely a gilded prison, but also a stage where intelligence, ambition, and strategy could alter the fate of nations. Culturally, the image of the harem became an enduring fascination. Ottoman poetry, songs, and miniatures celebrated its beauty, while European writers and artists romanticized or demonized it in their works. To some, it represented decadence; to others, mystery and allure. The Orientalist paintings of the 19th century, with their imagined scenes of languid women in opulent chambers, ensured that the harem would live on in Western imagination even as the institution itself vanished. But the true legacy lies in the duality of its memory. On one hand, the harem is remembered as a place of confinement, where countless women lived and died without ever knowing freedom beyond its walls. On the other, it is remembered as a crucible of power, where women, often dismissed by history, carved out spaces of influence in a male-dominated world. Even today, the harem sparks debate. Was it a gilded cage, a stage of power, or both? Was it a symbol of oppression, or a unique form of agency within rigid boundaries? The answer perhaps lies in its complexity. It was never one thing but many, layered like the silks its women wore. Its echoes remain in the stories we tell, the art we create, and the questions we continue to ask about power, gender, and the blurred lines between myth and reality. The harem may no longer exist, but its shadow lingers, captivating and unsettling, a reminder that history is never as simple as the fantasies it inspires. Beyond the layers of politics, discipline, and myth, life in the harem was also deeply human. The women who lived behind those gilded gates carried not only ambition, but also emotions, dreams, fears, and quiet acts of defiance that gave them a sense of self within a system designed to control them. Daily rituals played a central role in shaping that existence. Baths scented with rosewater became moments of both luxury and reflection, where women could escape the tension of rivalry, if only for an hour. Prayer, whispered in private corners, connected them to faith and memory, anchoring them in something larger than palace walls. The act of embroidery, often dismissed as idle craft, became a form of storytelling, threads weaving images that carried fragments of distant homelands or silent wishes for the future. Emotions often ran beneath the surface, hidden behind careful smiles and graceful bows. Longing for family left behind, sorrow for lost freedom, jealousy of rivals, all were carefully veiled. Yet bonds formed as well. Friendships emerged in whispers during late-night conversations, or in the quiet solidarity of women who shared the same fate. These relationships were fragile, tested constantly by rivalry, but they offered rare moments of humanity in a world that demanded masks. And within this strict system, women found ways to resist, not through open rebellion but through subtle gestures. A poem passed in secret, a song sung softly, its lyrics hinting at forbidden emotions. A rumor deliberately shaped to influence the harem's delicate balance of power. Resistance was not always loud. Sometimes it was the quiet insistence on remembering one's own identity, even when stripped of freedom. These silent acts did not overturn the walls of the harem, but they carved out spaces of individuality within them. They reminded each woman that she was not only a concubine, a pawn, or a favorite, but also a person, carrying her own story in the shadows of history. Not every concubine's name faded into silence. Some left such deep marks on history that their stories traveled beyond the harem walls, woven into chronicles, legends, and even whispers carried across empires. One of the most remarkable was Roxolana, also known as Hurrem Sultan. Born far from Istanbul, likely in present-day Ukraine, she entered the harem as a slave. Yet through wit, intelligence, and charm, she rose to become the legal wife of Sultan Suleiman the Magnificent, breaking centuries of custom. Hurrem did not merely survive within the system, she transformed it. She wielded political influence, advised the Sultan, and even engaged in state affairs. Her name feared and respected both inside and outside the palace. Her story proved that even within confinement, power could be seized. Another legend is Kosum Sultan, whose influence stretched across decades and multiple reigns. She became one of the most powerful women in Ottoman history, serving as regent for her sons and grandson. Her cunning diplomacy, ability to manipulate palace politics, and fierce defense of her family's power made her both admired and feared. For some, she was the ultimate example of female strength in the Ottoman court. For others, she was a warning of ambition unchecked. But not all stories were about power alone. Many concubines' lives were defined by tragedy. Women who fell from favor, who were exiled or executed, their dreams extinguished in silence. Chroniclers rarely recorded their names, yet their fates whispered a truth as enduring as the tales of queens. In the harem, a woman could rise to unimaginable heights, but she could also vanish overnight, erased as if she had never existed. These stories endured because they revealed the duality of harem life, both a prison and a throne, a place of suffocating confinement and dazzling opportunity. Each concubine's fate was shaped not only by beauty but by strategy, resilience, and often sheer luck. Through figures like Hurrem and Kosum, the world glimpses the extraordinary possibilities hidden behind locked doors. Their lives remind us that even within a system built to confine women, some found ways to bend history to their will. The Ottoman harem, once the beating heart of palace intrigue and feminine influence, did not vanish overnight. Its decline was gradual, shaped by the tides of reform, modernization, and the relentless pressures of a changing world. What had once been a symbol of imperial might and mystery began to look, in the eyes of reformers and foreign critics alike, like a relic of another age. By the 19th century, the empire itself was faltering. The Ottoman state, pressured by wars abroad and unrest within, faced mounting calls for modernization. As sultans embraced reforms to strengthen their crumbling authority, the harem, long seen as an emblem of tradition, became a target. The Tanzimat reforms, aimed at reshaping government and society, subtly undermined the harem's role, chipping away at the old system of dynastic politics where women and eunuchs had once thrived. Western travelers and diplomats added further pressure. To them, the harem symbolized everything they believed was backward about the empire. Their writings, often dripping with Orientalist fantasy or disdain, fueled a perception that the harem was not only decadent, but also incompatible with modern governance. Ottoman leaders, eager to prove themselves to Europe, gradually distanced their courts from practices that outsiders mocked. Inside the palace walls, the harem itself was changing. The number of women diminished, the grandeur lessened, and the political influence of concubines waned. By the late 19th century, figures like the Walid Sultan no longer held the same sway over affairs of state. The rise of constitutional movements and a more centralized bureaucracy further pushed the harem into irrelevance. The final blow came with the collapse of the Ottoman Empire in the early 20th century. When the Sultanate was abolished and the new Turkish Republic emerged under Mustafa Kemal Ataturk, the harem ceased to exist as an institution. The palaces that had once guarded its secrets became museums, their silken chambers stripped of whispers and rivalry, reduced instead to exhibits of a vanished world. Yet even in decline, the harem retained its allure. Its memory survived not as a living reality, but as legend. Part history, part fantasy, an echo of an empire that had stretched across continents. The women who once shaped its rhythms were gone, but their shadows lingered, immortalized in stories that outlived the empire itself. As the harem slipped into history, its walls crumbled not only in stone but also in memory, leaving behind a paradoxical legacy. It was both a gilded cage and a throne of hidden power, a place where countless women lived in silence, while a few rose to command the fate of an empire. Its decline did not erase these contradictions. It only magnified them. Looking back, the harem is difficult to define in simple terms. Was it a prison, designed to confine women and control dynastic succession? Yes. Was it also a political court, where women like Hurrem Sultan and Kosem Sultan shaped the empire with cunning and resilience? Absolutely. The truth lies somewhere in between, in the blurred space where captivity and power coexisted, sometimes in harmony, often in conflict. What remains most striking is not just the architecture of Topkapi or Dolmabahce, but the humanity that once filled those chambers. The harem was not simply an institution, it was a world of ambition and longing, of rivalries and friendships, of rituals and silent resistance. Its women were not mere figures of fantasy, nor passive victims of history, but individuals who navigated a treacherous system with courage, wit, and often heartbreaking sacrifice. The decline of the harem did not end its story. Instead, it transformed it into something larger, a mirror of how societies imagine power, gender, and desire. Even today, when the harem exists only in ruins and recollections, it continues to provoke fascination, sparking debates about myth versus reality, oppression versus agency, and the strange endurance of its legend. Standing at the edge of its memory, we see not only the fall of an imperial institution but also the persistence of its questions about freedom, influence, and the delicate boundaries between control and survival. The harem no longer exists. Its voice is silenced, its chambers empty. The silks have faded, the perfumes evaporated, the whispers dissolved into dust, and yet its presence lingers, not in walls of marble, but in the imagination of the world. It was a place of paradox, where captivity and opportunity shared the same breath, a prison of silken chains, but also a stage where a few women bent the course of empires, a realm where rivalry could end in ruin, yet where wit, patience, and resilience could carve a path to power. History often remembers the harem through fantasy or scandal, but beneath the myths lay lives, women who dreamed, feared, and fought in ways history rarely allows us to see. They were daughters torn from distant homes, mothers of future sultans, rivals turned allies, strangers who became sisters. In their silence there was resistance. In their confinement there was influence, in their fragility there was strength. The palaces that once contained their world now stand as museums, stripped of secrets yet still haunted by echoes. To walk through those halls today is to feel the weight of lives both hidden and unforgettable. And so we are left with a question. When history reduces people to symbols of power or fantasy, how much of their true humanity is lost? And if the harem teaches us anything, perhaps it is this, that behind every myth, behind every lattice of rumor and legend, there are real hearts that once beat unseen yet unforgotten.